Well, hey everybody, it's Sandy, and welcome back to my channel dedicated to helping you advocate for your own health one topic at a time. But as I keep saying, this is a very long topic. So today I want to talk about a couple of things. One is the plasma, the proposed treatment for COVID-19 using antibodies in plasma from people who have already recovered. Actually, somebody had asked me that in a question that they put in the comment box in a previous video, and I meant to answer that in earlier this week in my Q&A video, and I just didn't do it. So I want to talk about that today. Anyway, it's a good topic. And then I also want to talk about pets and the impact of this whole COVID-19, for those of us who have pets. And a couple other odds and ends and maybe a little more about, what we're doing. Please tell me what you're doing. I noticed I did get a few new subscribers and I really appreciate every single one of them. I love your comments and it's not as easy as it looks doing this. So it's good practice and thank you for subscribing. I'm just flattered and honored that you want to listen to me and interact with me in this format. So thank you. Okay, so the plasma treatment that someone had asked about, it's called convalescent plasma, and the theory behind it is that you can take from the blood. Plasma is the part of a component of blood, and you can take the plasma separate it from the overall sample of blood in people who have recovered from COVID-19, because anyone who's recovered from any particular virus then has antibodies to that virus. That's why they say usually viruses you can't get twice. I don't think that's always true. I think there's some exceptions to that, and they're not sure about COVID-19. But nonetheless, people who recover from viruses in general will have antibodies to those viruses. And then the theory is that you can take the blood, use those antibodies that are in the plasma, and administer that to someone who's sick with this virus, and hopefully that will help them mount the immune response because they'll have the antibody from the donor. Okay, so this has been used with other diseases. It's been used with polio, with measles, and with mumps back before we had vaccines. There apparently has been some question about its effectiveness with SARS and Ebola. The peer-reviewed studies that I read said that there's no indication that it really helps with Ebola, but there were cases where it apparently was very helpful. There was, in fact, a physician who was an aid worker in Africa during the Ebola epidemic, and he noticed one morning, I guess, that he had a fever, and he told his colleagues he was going to immediately self-isolate, and he asked to get a transfusion from a kid who had recovered, and he recovered. And then after that, one of his colleagues fell ill with it, and he gave his blood to that colleague, and that person recovered. So that's anecdotal. But Ebola is a very scary disease. It has a much higher mortality rate than COVID-19 or just about anything, I think, that has affected the human race. So I don't know if that issue has been put to bed. Well, it certainly hasn't been tested with COVID-19 because it hasn't been around long enough. But at any rate, that is the theory on how it works. Sometimes it works with some diseases, sometimes it doesn't. In general, a vaccine is preferable, but apparently the FDA has now given an approval to use this under very specific conditions, and I believe they're only going to allow it when a patient's condition is critical. They're not going to allow people to do this the convalescent plasma treatment for anything but a critical condition. It's going to be decided on a case-by-case basis, and physicians will have to contact the FDA to get permission to start this treatment. So obviously we're seeing a lot more strict oversight with this one than we are with that hydroxychloroquine, for example. And the reason is that one of the things that can go wrong is unlike with the hydroxychloroquine, which is, we think, relatively benign drug, especially given for a short period of time. Anytime you're given like a blood component transfusion, there's always some pretty big risks, okay? So you can have catastrophic effects. One thing is called antibody-dependent enhancement, and that is rare, but it's a situation where, ironically, the antibodies, which are supposed to fight off the offending organism, the virus, or sometimes a bacteria, those antibodies, in this case, they somehow facilitate the virus getting into the cells. It's ironic and it's rare, but sometimes that does happen. And of course, that's catastrophic. It sort of takes over. So I think for that reason, the FDA is using this more as like the right to try sort of thing, where the physician will have to contact the FDA. It takes a few hours to get an answer. I think they have an emergency number if people need an answer sooner than that. I can imagine that given the extent of this pandemic, that there might be some bottlenecking with that. I hope that they have adequate manpower to answer, probably all the kinds of requests they're going to get. I imagine they've thought of that. But that is plasma treatment. I'll be interested to see if it works. I'm not sure I feel it's all that promising yet based on what I've read, but I hope it is. And let's talk about that later. We'll kind of watch it and see how it is. The next thing I wanted to talk about is pets. So apparently there was this joke that went around that the World Health Organization had said that, dogs can't transmit, or they can't get sick from or transmit the COVID-19. So then it was World Health Organization acronym is who let the dogs out. So that's true. Dogs don't get sick with COVID-19. Now, I'm getting this information from a university, I believe it was Illinois. I wish I remembered. It was from the Veterinary Research Center and there's the ASPCA and all these different, websites, the American Veterinary Association, they're all have something on, each one of them have something on its website that talks about pets and COVID-19. So they know that dogs don't get sick from COVID-19, but dogs have tested positive for COVID-19. Apparently there were a couple of dogs out of Hong Kong, and that, kind of raised some hairs in the scientific community and among veterinary medicine. But what they found is that this was just a couple of dogs that were looked at, so it's case study. And they found that the dogs did turn positive, and after some time they swabbed negative, and that was just a test, but they didn't get sick. See, so dogs don't seem to get sick. And I think the same is true for cats, although being that I'm not really a cat person, I can't say. I haven't furiously looked this up because I'm trying to protect my own pet, but I believe it's true for animals in general, like cats, dogs, the kinds of things we have as house pets. I guess it's not true for bats. That was a bad joke. But anyway, one thing though that you have to be aware of is just because a dog isn't going to become sick with COVID-19. So the dog isn't going to be sneezing and coughing all over. That's the way we mostly catch this, is by respiratory large droplet. So primarily it's because you're within a certain number of feet of somebody and you can inhale some droplet. Or the secondary route is some droplet lands on like a countertop. You have your hand on that countertop and then you touch your face. That's the secondary route. That secondary route is kind of important here because a dog actually can be a conduit between people. Okay, so let's say somebody's real sick in the house and is sneezing and coughing all over the dog and then loving on the dog, and then somebody else is loving on the dog, petting the dog, and then touching their face. That is potentially a conduit. Now, the COVID-19 tends to live longer on smooth surfaces like countertops and stainless steel. Things that are more absorbent, like cardboard, they say 24 hours, although I did read that the data was, quote, noisy on cardboard, which tells me that it was all over the place. In some instances, they might have gotten 24 hours, and sometimes they saw more, sometimes they saw less. It's real variable. When they say the data is noisy, that's what that means. But anything that's sort of dry and absorbent like that the virus, tends to sink down into the material, and it's not real friendly for the virus to live in that. So, I would think that dog fur, animal hair sort of falls into that category, but it is something to be careful about. And I know the American Veterinary Association has said that out of an abundance of caution, if you are very sick, to try not to have so much contact with the dog. If somebody else can take care of the dog, that's great. If you have to, then you don't want to be right in the dog's face and loving on the dog and, having just too much intimate contact, and even better, wear a mask. So I think that this is an evolving situation, and I think we're going to learn a lot more as time goes in every aspect of this disease. So I don't think that pets up until now, understandably, have really been the priority in terms of much research with COVID-19 and any kind of interaction between people and pets and things like that. So I think that it's something to watch, and I have chosen to be cautious. I was also going to say, is anybody out there like learning new skills because of COVID-19 and because of having to stay home? Because that brings me to my next point. I have a 55-pound standard poodle who goes to a groomer, and I'm not going to send him to the groomer now. We're under a stay-at-home order anyway, so non-essential businesses are closed. But I wasn't planning to bring him to the groomer next time he's due anyway, because that's in like a week. First of all, we'll still be under this order, but even if we weren't, that conduit thing concerns me quite a bit, okay? Groomers are around a lot of different animals. A lot of people are coming and dropping off their animals and picking them up. And, just like I said, who's petting him, loving on him, who's close to him, and what does he pick up in there? And how am I going to like not touch my dog for 24 hours after he gets home? So I'm going to be watching a lot of YouTube videos on how to clip that standard poodle, and this dog is going to be so annoyed with me because I'm sure it's going to take a long time. So maybe I'll talk about that in another video. How did it go? So anyway, that's going to be my new, I don't want to even call it a skill. That's going to be my new endeavor. I don't know if it'll ever become a skill. I hope not. But I hope I can get back to taking him to the groomer when we're all through this. But anyway, so I wonder if anybody else is having to, do things that they've had somebody else do for them. I'm sure there's a whole lot of that, right? I think a whole lot of us are about to wrestle with our roots of our hair. So that might be my next skill I have to pick up. But I'd love to hear from you. I hope you found this interesting, and I'd love to hear your feedback. And until next time, thanks. Be safe. Bye-bye.